Welcome to the show. I'm Jonathan, your host. This is an old man podcast. Yes, I'm old. I'll be 80 soon, believe it or not. So believe me, I'm being honest. This will be a weekly podcast. I'll try to keep the time the same, where each episode tackles different topics, sometimes domestic or global. Sometimes we will just discuss current events. At the end of every episode, you'll see an email where you can send your thoughts, comments, ideas for future shows, your feedback, criticism, whatever. Anything you offer is good. It helps improve my program. And I see right now that the email address is on the screen, and I don't know how to get rid of it or make it larger. In any case, welcome to life. I'll do better next time. Oh yes, I appreciate every message, so please don't be shy. If you want a topic discussed, drop a note. This week we'll briefly discuss and analyze the activity of political floor jumping and how it relates to democracy. Floor jumping, also known as floor crossing, refers to the act whereby an elected representative leaves the political party under which they were elected and joins another party without seeking a new mandate from the voters. We've seen this time and time again. After examining democratic theory, historical patterns, ethical pressures, party discipline, and comparative models, a balanced conclusion sort of emerges. I mean, it's not definitely clear, but okay, so let's get on with it. Today I will take you through a succinct but thoughtful and integrated narrative about floor jumping, also known as floor crossing. Long, in-depth introspection is good, but let's be honest. Now, I'm not creating a doctoral dissertation, but I will briefly illuminate a few thoughts. The action of floor jumping is dramatic because it changes who the representative is accountable to while they continue to occupy a seat granted by voters under a different banner. It raises immediate questions about democratic legitimacy, representation, accountability, and the balance of power within a parliamentary system. The act itself is simple. Its implications are profound, touching every major principle that defines a functioning democracy. How this relates to democracy by definition is interesting. Democracy is a system in which political power ultimately flows from the people. At least it's supposed to. It is characterized by free and fair elections, political equality, the rule of law, accountability, and the expectation that elected representatives act responsibly on behalf of their constituents. Floor crossing sits directly at the intersection of elected official autonomy and the mandate of their constituents. These facts and issues create a tension between the people and the elected official. To understand the democratic implications of floor crossing, we must examine how it interacts with each of these foundational principles. From the perspective of popular sovereignty, floor crossing challenges whether voters choose a person, a party, or both. When a representative switches parties midterm, the legislature's composition changes without voter input. That raises the question, does the seat belong to the individual or to the party? If voters primarily choose the party, floor crossing appears to undermine democratic consent. If voters choose the individual, floor crossing may be an expression of representative independence. This tension is central to the debate because democracy must balance the will of the people with the autonomy of the representative. Representation can be seen through two models. the delegate model, where representatives follow voters' wishes, and the trustee model, where representatives exercise independent judgment. Supporters of floor crossing emphasize conscience, new information, or evolving political realities. Critics argue that switching parties abandons the platform voters endorsed and breaks the representative's commitment. Floor crossing exposes the tension between these two models. From an accountability perspective, floor crossing creates a democratic gap. In Canada, MPs, Member of Parliament, who cross the floor are not required to trigger a by-election, meaning voters cannot respond until the next general election. That can weaken accountability, especially when a crossing alters parliamentary arithmetic. Conversely, forcing immediate by-elections could weaken representative independence and make MPs fearful of dissent. Accountability must be balanced with autonomy, and floor crossing tests the limits of both. Legally, by the rule of law, floor crossing is permitted in Canada, but legally and in terms of democratic legitimacy are not always the same. The rule of law ensures representatives have the right to act independently, but it does not guarantee that such actions will be perceived as legitimate by the public. Taken together the big picture, these tensions show that floor crossing is not inherently democratic or undemocratic. Instead, it is a stress test of democracy's internal contradictions: individual autonomy versus the collective mandate, conscience versus party loyalty, representation versus accountability, and sustainability versus flexibility. Floor crossing forces these contradictions into the open, making it a valuable lens through which to examine the strengths and weaknesses of a parliamentary democracy system. Floor crossing has existed in Canada since Confederation in the 1800s. Party lines were loose, and MPs frequently shifted allegiances for regional interests or personal relationships. As parties became more disciplined in the 20th century, floor crossing became rare, more dramatic, and politically costly. The evolution of party discipline transformed floor crossing from a routine parliamentary maneuver into a politically explosive act. Floor jumpers typically face public backlash, a loss of trust, accusations of opportunism, and electoral punishment. Many lose their seats at the next election. Some receive short-term rewards, such as cabinet appointments, but long-term uncertainty often follows. These personal consequences reflect public discomfort with representatives who appear to abandon their electoral mandate. The party losing a member experiences embarrassment, narrative damage, internal tension, and potential loss of government stability. The party gaining a member enjoys a short-term boost and symbolic victory, but may face internal resentment and public backlash. Floor crossing affects not only the individual, but the broader political landscape, influencing party dynamics and public perception. Let's look at a few concrete examples to see how these dynamics play out. I hope that my data is accurate and correct. I've done my best to ensure this is accurate data. The intent here is for democracy not to take sides or aim at any individual. For example, Belinda Stronach, 2005, she crossed the Conservatives to the Liberals accepted a cabinet post, and faced intense criticism, and she did not run again. David Emerson, 2006, he crossed from the Liberals to the Conservatives shortly after the election, triggering widespread public anger and effectively ending his political career. Eve Adams, 2015, she crossed from the Conservatives to the Liberals, failed to secure a nomination, and left politics. Scott Bryson, 2003, he crossed from the PC party to the Liberals and built a successful long-term career. Jenica Atwin, 2021, she crossed from the Green Party to the Liberals and was re-elected. Maxime Bernier, 2018, he left the Conservatives from the People's Party of Canada and subsequently lost his seat. Patterns emerge. Most floor crossers lose re-election. Cabinet appointments often fuel accusation of opportunism. Principal crossings sometimes succeed, and floor crossing can alter government stability. Some democracies require representatives who switch parties to vacate their seats and recontest them in a by-election. This restores voter consent and deters opportunism, but risks creating frozen MPs, representatives too afraid to dissent because doing so would trigger an immediate election. Mandatory by-elections are democratic in theory, but potentially paralyzing in practice. Mandatory by-elections restore democratic consent, prevent opportunism, protect party platforms, and increase transparency. Inversely, mandatory by-elections can weaken representative independence, encourage rigid party discipline, impose costs, and may punish principled dissent. Under a mandatory by-election rule, most current floor crossers would likely lose their seats. Only a few with strong personal mandates generally survive. Such a rule would sharply reduce floor crossings, but at the cost of flexibility and independence. If Canada outlawed floor crossing, several actions could be adopted: automatic seat vacating, temporary ineligibility to run again, banning cabinet appointments for crossers, requiring constituency referendums, allowing crossing only for conscience issues, or requiring MPs to sit as independents until the next election. Each model balances democratic values differently and carries distinct strengths and weaknesses. In the United States, party switching is rare, but legislators often vote independently. Party discipline is weaker, and individual judgment is more common. If Canada adopted that model, as in the US, floor crossing would become largely unnecessary because MPs could dissent without leaving their party. However, such a shift would fundamentally alter Canada's parliamentary system, which relies on party cohesion and collective responsibility. One of the least discussed but most powerful drivers of floor crossing is the tension between campaign promises and governing realities. This drives me nuts. Campaigns are aspirational. Governing is constrained by budgets, constitutional limits, and party strategy. Representatives may feel ethically obligated to honor their campaign promises even when their party shifts direction. This creates an internal turmoil, especially when party expectations conflict with personal conscience or constituent interests. In some cases, floor crossing becomes the representative's attempt to resolve an ethical contradiction between loyalty to the voters, loyalty to the party, and loyalty to their own values. Breaking pre-election promises creates a three-way ethical conflict, specifically voter expectations, party loyalty, and personal conscience. Representatives may feel trapped or compromised when these obligations diverge sharply. Floor crossings can be a response to this ethical pressure, not merely a political calculation. The ethical landscape of representative democracy is complex, and the floor crossing often reflects deeper moral tensions. After examining democratic theory, historical patterns, ethical pressures, party discipline, and comparative models, a balanced conclusion sort of emerges. Mandatory by-elections are the cleanest mechanism for restoring democratic consent, but they risk creating representatives who are too afraid to dissent. Unrestricted floor crossing preserves independence, but undermines voter intent and can destabilize Parliament. This next thought may be extremely important. The most balanced approach supported by the evidence is a middle ground model. Allow representatives to leave their party, but require them to sit as independents until the next election, and prohibit them from joining another party or receiving cabinet appointments midterm. This model protects voter intent, preserves representative conscience, reduces opportunist power, and maintains parliamentary stability. In conclusion, floor crossing is not simply a political maneuver. It is a window into the deeper tensions of representative democracy, the struggle between individual judgment and collective mandate, between campaign promises and governing realities, and between ethical integrity and political pressure. A balanced policy approach can address these tensions without silencing the independence that is essential to a healthy democratic system. In close, this crossing is a beneficial feature of a democratic system, is a question, or is it something else? Well, I certainly hold my own views. My intention here is not to persuade you in one direction or another, rather to elucidate a few facts. The issue is too nuanced, too skewed, too personal, too complex for a simple conclusion. And if there is a reasonable conclusion, then it probably deserves to be explored vis-a-vis many doctoral dissertations, and then discussed by a panel of what? Intellectuals? I don't know. In any case, we all know that if panel were created, there seldom is a unified consensus. The debate whether floor jumping should be allowed, it's like finding a repetitive number in pi, 22 divided by 7. When it comes to politics, decisions, if you wish, conclusions are seldom reached. Human decision, making it complex, which is often influenced by countless personal, social, ego-related, financial, and political factors. As with economics, where supply and demand are estimates rather than absolutes, political behavior is fluid. If there is a solution, it's seldom reached with 100% consensus. People can and do change their minds quickly, sometimes overnight. Scholars have long attempted to understand the nature of political choice and the essence of democracy itself. Entire dissertations and research programs have been devoted to these questions, and the work continues. Sorry about that. To illustrate the tension within democratic systems, consider a very elemental, simplified voting scenario. Stick with me now. 100 people are eligible to vote. 50 choose to vote. If 26 voters support one party, that party forms a government. The outcome is mathematically sound, yet it raises an important question, many important questions. What becomes of the 24 votes or voters who supported other candidates? Their votes did not contribute to the final result. And what about the 50 who chose not to vote? Assuming, as we will, that they are eligible voters, why has the system failed them? Why was the pre-election system so uncompelling that these 50 eligible voters chose not to exercise their rights to vote? Does this mean democracy has failed the 24 minority voters who did vote and their vote was not sufficient to elect a party or a candidate? Does this imply that democracy has failed as it did not motivate the other 50 who chose not to vote? In a very elemental form, what this example shows is that 26% of the electorate dictated the direction and outcome of this hypothetical election. What does this statistic say? Is democracy, as we practice it today, is it truly the best system of government? These are questions each person must answer for themselves. What is clear is that in many democratic societies, those whose preferred candidate lost or their party lost often feel they are unheard or their vote is disregarded. Their votes, in effect, do not translate into representation. This sense of disenfranchisement is real and frequently expressed. Floor crossing, while not identical to this aforementioned scenario, it touches on a similar concern. In Canada, it is currently illegal for an elected representative to leave the party under which they were elected and join another party. But should it be? Should it be legal? Some argue that there should be consequences when an elected official abandons the platform on which they campaigned. Others suggest if members of a party believe their leadership has strayed too far from its stated principles, they should have the right to trigger an internal leadership review. One proposal is to move away from the single leader model and instead adopt a leadership structure with multiple senior officials, perhaps three. You can always break a tie. If sufficient number of elected members of a party express dissatisfaction, a leadership review could be initiated. This might reduce the incentive for floor crossing by providing internal mechanisms for accountability and course correction. Another consideration is that the stability and integrity of leadership itself. If the party leader or head of government begins to act unpredictably, abnormally, out of character, perhaps reacting abnormally due to mental or health issues, it happens, perhaps due to the stresses of leadership, or they deviate sharply from the party's commitments, then perhaps an oversight mechanism could help maintain democratic accountability without forcing representatives to abandon their party altogether. Democratic systems evolve over time. The United States, for example, continually adapts its institutions in response to new domestic and global pressures. Canada may also need to consider reforms that reflect the realities of modern political life. Floor crossing undeniably raises questions about democratic representation. When an elected official switches parties, the voters who support them may feel disregarded. Their expectations, based on campaign promises and party platforms, appear to be set aside. This can erode trust in the political system. Ultimately, democracy is complicated. In very general terms, the voter turnout for federal elections nationally in Canada ranges from about 60 to 69%, and in terms of provincial elections, an estimate all provinces combined ranges from about 53 to 56%. These voter statistics are not alarming, they're not terrible, but, well, they are what they are. Clearly, if an eligible voter does not choose to vote, then they have forfeit their right to complain. Yes, I know that's a bit harsh, I suppose, but it's also real, pragmatic. When citizens vote, they exercise their power for a brief moment, and it is brief. Let's emphasize brief. After that, the elected representatives and their parties make decisions as they see fit, sometimes aligned with voter expectations, sometimes not. Is this democracy? In its current form, yes. But whether it's the best version of democracy is a question that continues to invite debate and create division. As we've explored today, the numbers tell a story of a shifting landscape in Canadian politics. From the high engagement for provincial elections, we see that in the Maritimes, to the record-breaking lows we've tracked in Ontario, every percentage point at the ballot box is supposed to represent a voice in government. But as we have seen, the math of our democracy isn't just defined by those who show up. It's defined by what happens after the polls close. When voter turnout sets the foundation, floor crossing can rewrite the blueprint. We've seen how the gap between the ballot, which you cast, and the government that sits in the legislature can widen in an instant. When a member of parliament decides to change their party affiliation, they aren't just moving across the aisle. They are effectively shifting the legislative balance of power without a single extra vote being cast by the public. It begs the question, in a system where party discipline is paramount, does floor crossing represent constituents, or are they simply bypassed the mandate those voters originally granted to them? We are left with a system where turnout sets the stage, but floor crossing changes the play while the audience is still watching. It serves as a stark reminder that political loyalty isn't always as permanent as the check mark you've made on your ballot. If you're left wondering if your vote still carries the same weight, or if you feel the gap between our political system and our legislative reality is growing, you aren't alone. Ultimately, these stats and these maneuvers are more than just political theater. They are the pulse of our democratic health. It's worth asking, did you get the government you voted for? And what does it say about our institutions when the will of the people can be altered and disregarded by a rogue elected official who decides that he or she is unhappy with their current situation, and on their own volition they choose to floor jump? I'm Jonathan. This has been an Old Man podcast. Thanks for spending part of your day diving into the data with me. Stay skeptical, stay engaged, and keep questioning the math behind the curtain. This world, these times are exhausting, exacerbating. They pretty much stress everyone. Costs, expenses keep rising. It's difficult to survive these days. Don't be placid. Ask questions. Explore things. Don't believe everything you read and hear. I'm one of you. I'm not a multimillionaire. We're all struggling. Please drop me a line if there is a topic that you wish to be discussed. And of course, if you have criticisms, you're welcome to make them known. This is my first podcast. I promise to do better with each subsequent production. The email address where you may contact me is posted at the bottom of the screen. Actually, it's posted on the screen all the time. I don't know how to turn it off. In any case, it's Methuselah Podcast at proton.me. Thanks for watching. I promise to do better next time. Take care, everybody.